I think we're clear on styled components, at least the general setup, since at the end of the day, we really just need to add the wrapper to our component. That's all we have to do, since I already included all the styling. So now we can finally start working on our app. And I think I'm going to start by setting up the router. So we'll have homepage, about page, products page, single product page. That is, if we click on a product notice, we navigate over here. Also, we're going to have a cart and the checkout, and of course, the error. Now, as we're setting up the React router, I'll also show you some nifty setup when it comes to index.js. But for now, let's just navigate to app.js. I think I can remove that testing sucker. I don't think we need it here. Let's save it. And also I can delete that file as well. So let me delete it. And I'm sorry, that's not app.js. That's, oh yeah, move to trash. And once I'm here, remember when we were setting up the router, what we needed? We needed a browser router. And of course, we gave it an alias as a router. Then also we needed a switch and a route. And remember, I mentioned that all my routes are right now in the pages directory. And of course, every component just reflects the page. And in order to render them, of course, I would need to import. So previously we have done something like this, where we go with import. And then of course, I'm going to come up with name. For example, this is going to be the about page. And I'm going to be getting it from, and I'm looking for the pages and then the about page. And in order to get all the pages, I would do something like this, where I copy and paste and then change the values. However, there is a better setup if you don't like this one, because the problem with this one, if you just have multiple files like that, then where you're importing, well, your file just gets giant, correct? If I have 15 imports like this, then 15 imports from the other file. As you can see, the file gets quite big somewhat fast. And a better setup is using the index. Because if you notice here with the components, I have import, and then I specifically say what I'm importing from the components folder. And notice here how I don't have this extra forward slash. So this doesn't get me from the specific file. It just gets me from the components folder. So again, it's not going to affect the functionality. It's just going to affect how the file where we're importing is going to look like. So when I have a big project, I rather prefer this setup where I'm using the index. So how it would work? Well, first of all, I'm going to remove all these imports. I'm not going to need them. And here in the pages folder, the directory, set up index.js. Now, of course, I already set up that file for you, but in general, if you have your own project and if you want to set up this type of import, you would need to have index.js, since it's going to be the entry point in the directory. The moment you create a file with the name of index.js, that's going to be the main entry point. And in this index.js, what I would want is actually set up the imports. So index.js, now I'm going to import files from this directory. Again, that's very important. You technically can import from different directories, but that's not what we would want. I want only import files from this directory and then export it. And the way it's going to look like, I'm going to go here, import, and then home, and I'm going to right away give them different names. So notice, of course, the file name is homepage, but I'm going to name them home, and I'm going to say that I would like to import file from the homepage. And I will right away in the index.js export it as well. So I'll say export, and I'll say that I would want to export home. And essentially what that means that in the app.js now, I can do the same thing like I have with components, where I right away say, hey, I would want to grab the navbar, sidebar, and footer. And please keep in mind that these are named exports right now. In here, I'm exporting as default, meaning I'm importing as default from the home, because of course in the home page, I'm exporting as default, like so. So in the index.js, I'm importing as default. But when I'm exporting, I'm actually exporting as the name export. Now you can add alias if you want. You would add as and whatever. But in my case, I'm just going to leave the same name as I have right now for the home. So in the app.js, what I would need to do is go with import and then set up curly braces since my imports are named. And I'm going to go with import home since that is the name from, and then I just need to point to directory. That's all I have to do. The same like I have with components. So in here, notice I'm just going with the pages where it is. There it is. Now I import, and in order to test it out, I'm just going to go with home. And once I render my component, I should see homepage. So everything works. So now in the index.js, I just need to import all these pages and then export. And then wherever I would want to use those components, I simply go with pages. Since I have the index.js, that is my main entry. And then I specifically say, well, which components I would want. And if you take a look at the components, notice, of course, we have way more files. Now, I didn't export all of them since it wasn't necessary. There's some files that I'm using only here locally within the components, but you'll also notice that this export one is pretty giant, correct? So I have index.js, I'm importing all of these components, and then I right away export them. So that way, wherever I need it in my app, I can simply go to components and say, hey, listen, get me navbar, get me sidebar, get me footer, or whatever component you'd want. Again, this is a setup thing. Doesn't mean the functionality will change. Of course, you can do the multiple lines of imports, but it just makes your file to look a bit cleaner, in my opinion. Again, that is your choice. So in my case, I'm going to go to index.js in the pages. And by the way, since technically this is a node thing, and if you find this annoying where you have a bunch of index.js's, let's imagine a scenario where you have a bunch of directories with that index.js. You can also set up different name. Now, I'm not going to cover that since I think it's a bit out of the scope of this course. Just keep in mind that if you find having a bunch of these index.js is annoying, there is a way how you can actually name it differently. For example, I don't know, you could name it pages.js, and then you just need to set up the package.json, I believe it was, where you just point to that file as the main one. Again, a little bit out of the scope. Definitely you can Google that one. For now, since we have only 2 directories that do that, I'm just going to stick with that index.js approach, since by default index.js will be the main entry point. So I'm going to navigate back to the pages, and one by one, I'm just going to import those files. And I believe I have 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think I have 8. No, I have 7. One more here. And then, of course, I'll just change this one around. So let me select all of these and I'll delete them. And the same is going to go here for the homepage. And then we'll just use 2 cursors. Or, you know what, we cannot use 2 cursors since, of course, I'll name them differently. So products, and then here we'll go with products page. Like so. Then the next one is single product, and we're gonna go with single page. And again, this is an example of why I don't want to do the imports together. So of course, yeah, we're doing it right now since I wanted to showcase the index.js, but in general, I just find it somewhat redundant if we have to type it together. That's why for the rest of the project, you'll have all your imports already in place. About, and then about page, of course. The next one is cart. And by the way, I have all uppercase. So cart, and then cart page. Then I would want to get error and not console log. So we're going to go with error. That's going to be the name of my component, and that is coming from the error page. Then we've got a checkout. And as you can see, I'm just removing that page thing. So checkout page. And lastly, we have a private route, which we're going to do all the way at the end. And this is just going to prevent non-users going to the checkout page. So we're going to go here with a private route. And now, of course, I just need to export them. So I'm going with products. Then I would want to go with single product. Then about, of course, cart, error, and you get the gist. Checkout, and finally, private route. And you know what? In this case, I think I should name it exactly the same. So private route. And once we've got this export in place, now, of course, we can just navigate to app.js and just grab all of them. So let me go here, and I'm gonna say that I would want to get home, single product, products, and all that. So let me go with single product here, then cart, and then checkout. Also the error about, and products, and of course the private route. And now let's finally set up our router. So in here, I'm returning a div at the moment, which of course is something that I'm going to change. So we're going to go with a router, and eventually I'll add all my footers and nav bars and sidebars. But let's just wait a second. First, let's set up the router where we're going to have a switch and not this type of switch. So we're going to go with switch component, of course. And then inside of the switch component, I'm going to set up my routes. I'm going to start with my home one. So route, and then remember, we had the exact prop. We just made sure that we only navigate here if the path matches exactly. And of course, now I would want to set up my home route. Hopefully you remember how we were setting up the router, since I'm not going to spend too much time on that. So we have a route, and now, of course, I would want to set up the rest of my routes as well. Now, the only one that's going to be, I don't know, I don't want to say tricky again, since we have covered that quite a few times, but remember the single product, we'll have to use some kind of param. But let's just start with the simple setup where I'm going to copy and paste. And you know what? In this project, I'll leave exact for all the pages. So not just for the / meaning the home page. I'll add that exact for all of them, just in case. And here, of course, we're looking for about, and then I would want to copy and paste this one as well. And we're looking for the cart. So let's just change this one around, cart. And this is going to be a cart component, of course. Then I would want to copy this sucker as well. And we're going to have the product setup. So product. And this is going to be a product component, like so. And then we have one for single product, one for checkout, and one for error. So in here, right after the products route, I'm going to go with that single product. And this one is going to be a bit different, where we're going to go with path. And you know what? In case I also set up the exact here, I'm going to say path is equal to, and we're looking for product. Again, that's my choice. If you want to just go with / and then the ID, you can definitely do it. In my case, I'm going to go with products. So that's just going to mean that I'm signaling that this is going to be a product, and then the URL param is going to be ID. And then remember, we needed to have a children prop, at least in React Router 5. And then which component we would want to render, of course, that is going to be a single product. And then we close out the route like so. Then we've got a checkout. In this case, I can just copy and paste right after this one. And I'm just going to call this checkout. Now, checkout is going to be one that is going to be wrapped eventually in a private route, but not for now. I don't want to deal with that right now. So I'll just say path checkout. And of course, I would want to render checkout like so. So we're going to go with checkout component. And then lastly, I would also want to have a error page. If the user navigates to the page that doesn't exist, we just say path and then remember star. Essentially, it's just going to match any path. And we're going to go with our error component. Now, we're almost done. But then remember that there's going to be some components that are displayed on all the pages. And in our case, it's going to be 3 components. It's going to be a navbar component. It is going to be a footer. And it will also be the sidebar here. So sidebar will be only displayed on small screen because we'll just keep the button on a small screen notice here. But I would want to render on all the pages. So this is going to be our sidebar. That's why in here I have imported navbar, sidebar, and in the footer. So I would want to place the navbar and the sidebar here on the top. And as far as the sidebar, we're going to use position fixed. So technically you can place it wherever you would like. But in my case, I just like to keep the same structure. So sidebar, and then below it, below the switch, I'm going to go with my footer here. So save it. And now let's navigate to the bigger screen. And let's just test it out whether we have everything. So I have the navbar, sidebar, homepage, and a footer. So that looks about right. And now let's navigate to the cart page. And now, of course, I have the cart page. Now let's go quickly to, localhost, and then we're going to try out products like so. So now we're in the products page, and then I'm going to add one more /, and then whatever value you'd want. Now, in this case, it already has cached one of the IDs that I used, but you can simply use one just to see whether we're navigating to that single product page. And there it is. Of course, now we're here. Now, if I'm going to go to some kind of page that doesn't exist, for example, if I'm going to go to hello, of course, I should see the error page. So that should be our basic setup as far as the React router. Again, something that we have already done quite a few times. That's why we kind of moved swiftly. I guess the most interesting thing in this setup was the fact that we can use the index.js. Again, that was something new. And hopefully that is clear why it is somewhat nifty to use it. And now, of course, we can proceed to our next step.